After stalling as long as we could waiting for the prices to come down on shipping containers, we decided it was time to change plans and DIY a shed. We'll need it for storing tools and materials while we build the house. Greg originally designed a lean-to style shed, but we priced materials and plywood was just too expensive. So I looked into a design I had considered years ago for a cabin build, but decided against because I didn't know that it would be strong enough for a residential structure, the Gothic arch shed. All these years later, not only does the design come in handy to save money, it matches the arch cabin kit pretty perfectly. In our area, we can build any non-residential structure without a permit, so long as it's under 200 square feet. The shed will be 12 by 16, approximately 192 square feet. Crunching the numbers on both styles of sheds, the Gothic arch is cutting the cost nearly in half. The biggest single savings is using metal roofing panels in place of plywood or OSB. We almost double the square footage for nearly the same price, and we don't have to then weatherproof and clad it in siding or roofing. This one product will be the roof, the walls, the shingles, and the siding, saving us a lot of money. We may even manage to insulate it someday and refit it into a guest house or workshop. After measuring and remeasuring, and then marking, we began with the rented auger, digging holes for the support posts. Because it's a shed, we're not going as deep as the piers for the house will be, plus the place we rented from didn't have extensions for the auger, so we were limited in depth anyway. After doing all 9 holes, we then decided it would be a good idea to check Google for the proper depth and width for our post size, and that's when we realized we needed to make them wider. So we changed bits and dug them all over again, wider this time. Even doing each hole twice, we had the auger returned by early afternoon. If we ever have another project that needs post holes, we both agreed this will be a rental we do again for sure. Once the holes were in, Greg began cutting the lumber for the foundation and then to frame the floor. After a brief discussion about which way to lay the plywood decking, we got that screwed down and began the jig for the arches. Each arch is made up of 3 pieces of 1 by 4 by 12 lumber, with 2 pieces laminated with wood glue and separated from the third with 6-inch 2 by 4 spacers. Each arch took about an hour to rig up, clamp, and set before we could move on to the next. With 2 jigs, you could basically rotate back and forth for nearly constant production. We just did 1 jig on the shed floor and then worked on other projects for the 30 minutes we left each arch to set in place. We completed 6 arches the first day after sorting out the decking and did the last 2 the following morning after a supply run to get more replacements for busted boards. We lost 3 total boards, 2 on the first day and 1 on the second. Good thing we bought extras. 16 feet was the longest single sheet of metal roofing we could get at our nearest box store, and we didn't want to have to figure out seams. Plus, it fit on our 14-foot trailer, and it kept the building within the 200 square foot limit. The forecast shifted after our first day doing ribs. Snow was expected in dips below 25 Fahrenheit, so we rushed in the morning to get the replacement boards and siding, and then we rushed to finish the final ribs before the weather hit. I attempted to empty the tent to strike camp, but we just weren't fast enough. The storm hit before we unloaded the roofing or got the deck and arches covered, much less packed up the tent. So we covered everything we could and loaded tools into the van to go to storage, and got ourselves a hotel room as a treat. The next day we had a small window from late morning to early afternoon to strike the tent and secure camp before another storm was expected to hit. We beat it by minutes. Sorry there's no footage after the weather turned bad, but we were just in so much of a hurry trying to get everything done that there wasn't time for setting up cameras and worrying about that sort of thing. But here's some footage of sunrise on an eastern-oriented section road on the morning of the vernal equinox. It was too cloudy to see it, but the sun should have risen due east at the end of the road. Greg's schedule is 2 weeks on call and 1 week off, so we returned home, eager to return in 2 weeks to raise the arches and sheathe the outside, and with any luck, end caps and a door, too. Our goal on the second trip out was to get vertical and clad, and maybe, if lucky, even a door. The first step was removing the tarp and clearing the floor. Sounds easy enough. It wasn't. Right before we left for New Mexico, I sneezed and felt a pop in my shoulder. I didn't find out until later that I dislocated 2 ribs, displaced a third, and aggravated the scar tissue from a rotator cuff tear I never even knew I had. I got my goggles on because we're having a little bit of a windstorm. And I got my heating pad on my shoulder because I blew out my shoulder sneezing, because that's apparently something that happens when you're 40. So yeah, all around good looking day. I'm rocking it. But pain doesn't mean there's any less work to do. Building the end caps was our first step to getting vertical. After that, we needed to fasten our crossbeam at the peak. Then attach the middle arches to that crossbeam. Next step in framing was hammering in the cross braces. Next came cleaning up the OSB edges and attaching the hurricane straps to secure the arches to the base. It's Tuesday, April 12th. We gotta get Greg back to work tomorrow morning. So we're gonna work as hard as we can today to get this buttoned up. We gotta do one more beam across the top, and then tie back this whole side, and then cover it, and mostly have a shed. So, yeah, that's today's plan. We're doing it all at 25 mile per hour up to 35 mile per hour winds today, so yay! The wind was already strong, so bad shoulder and all, I tagged in to hold it in place with a cargo strap, while Greg fastened it to the frame. There was a lot of singing of "Let's Go Fly a Kite" from Mary Poppins. We purchased enough panels that we could have one across the peak instead of trying to get two panels to mesh nicely and having to affix some kind of flashing over them. This one piece of siding is the roof and the peak flashing. In this case, we used the wind to our advantage on the first side. By half-screwing two screws into the ribs at convenient points, we were able to create a lip to rest each panel on as we went up. So the wind held it to the side while the screws held it up for us. And we continued down the first side, resting on the screws, fastening panels, then sealing the seams with a bead of silicone. The other side proved much more difficult. Even with the far side clad and blocking some of the wind, it was blowing against us the whole time. Eventually, we got to only 2 panels left and decided it was time to load everything into the shed and seal it up. Next visit, we could just take it apart to get back in. On the third and final trip, we removed the 4x8 piece of OSB where the door was planned, and we set our tent inside the shed to avoid the last of the cold winds of spring. Cozy, but still cold. To finish off the doors, we ripped the OSB in half, built frames, slapped on some hinges, and called them done.
We have doors! Yay! We finished the shed other than like siding and windproofing some more and ventilation.
Welcome to
Possibly a
Bunny Butt
window.
Acres, where nothing is ever finished. And when it does get finished, the friggin' wind whips it out.
As a finishing touch, Greg used some spare wood to make some stairs and a ramp for the generator. Some cheap door handles and lock hardware, and it was secure enough for us to head home again. This brought the total for the shed to $36.93. Mind you, we still need to do siding on the end, and it's not sealed or insulated. That could easily be added later if desired. For right now, it's just secure enough to secure tools and materials.